Hi there. Welcome to Infinite Stories. This is the podcast where we sit down and interview everyday people just like you and me. This is your host, Mitchell Vine, and boy, do we have an incredible story for you. Let's jump into this week's interview. Well, thank you so much for sticking it out and being ready to come onto the podcast today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Britt. I'm a full-time artist specializing in faith-based texture art. I work a lot with people on their stories and creating custom art that they can hang on their walls, and it's not just a pretty piece, but it's something that actually tells their story. I love doing that, and I'm grateful that that's been my full-time gig now for several years. Outside of painting, I am also a creative consultant and graphic designer. And so I help faith based businesses and nonprofits tell their story in a different way. So that could be anything from branding, logos, event planning, things like that. Just whatever. I really feel led to help those who have big dreams but are kind of stuck and not sure like what to do. And I just go in and I pull diesel fuel on it and it's like a fire starter, they get all excited and then we go from there. So yeah, that's
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, so many questions just came up, so I gotta hold on to those because that's later on in the story. Let's go all the way back to the very beginning of your story.
yeah.
What are some of the earliest memories that you have growing up?
Oh, well, I mean, art comes to mind, like just how I got started doing what I do now. And my parents divorced when I was 7.
Hmm.
And that was a really rough time as a 7-year-old. My parents didn't really tell me the gist of what was going on. And so, in some ways, I kind of carried that as a 7-year-old, like thinking it was my fault and whatnot. But I remember doing some art therapy classes, like during the divorce. And I remember someone asked me, like, Britt, can you just paint what you feel? And I remember thinking, oh, that feels so much easier than like actually sharing with words, like
Hmm.
what I'm going through. And so that made such an impression on me as a kid. And I think I was just drawn to drawing ever since then and have wanted to be an artist as long as I can remember. But after that, I really used art as a tool. And I was probably like 8 or 9 when my mom said she was really concerned about me because I was starting to draw all these like, graveyards and broken homes. And I was processing as a kid what was going on in my life. And we had moved from Dallas to Arkansas and to be closer to my mom's side of the family. And she said she was really just praying, like, Lord, please let her be okay. Please let her be okay. And she said one day I came home with one of those little ripped out yellow pieces of construction paper, and I had drawn something on it. And the image was really awesome. Like, I still use this story today because it just shows like the Lord met me at 7 and he hasn't left me since. And um, what the image was it was a little yellowish orange fish, like a goldfish, right? Swimming in a great big ocean. And it was being chased by this like ferocious looking shark with like all these teeth. And the most notable thing about the painting was the fish had a smile on its face. But above the fish in the sky was an angel, and it also had a smile on its face. So it was almost like the fish knew that it was being chased, but it was also smiling because it knew it was protected. And my mom said when I gave her that painting, she just was like overwhelmed with hope. And at 7, I saw the look on my mom's face and I could see, oh, this brought her peace. And I think that was the first time I realized that art could be a vessel to bring people hope. And it never left me. And so that's been my goal ever since then is how do I bring hope to others through what God has gifted me to do, and that's art.
Man, I love that. That is like the best introduction to any story that I've ever heard. That is incredible.
Awesome.
Okay. So you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but one of my favorite questions to ask is where did you first understand what sin was? Would that be the divorce that you were talking about?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to get involved in a youth group at church. And so, Sunday school that taught me a lot and youth group. But when you're around a group of people for a long period of time, you start to see things and you start
Mm,
to pick up on, oh, that probably wasn't the best way to communicate, or that wasn't the best way to show God's love. And so, the divorce definitely set me back in some ways, but it also taught me a lot too, just to lean in,
mm,
to what the Lord was saying and not the lies that I was believing. But yeah, I think that was probably one of the first times that I can vividly remember. And that's, what is the truth and what
mm,
is my fault? What is not my fault? Um,
mm,
and then another one that comes to mind is Bible college, honestly. The college that I went to, and I'll get to that later, but the college that I went to, they would let anybody speak within reason.
mm,
You would have to, as a Bible student, discern what was truth and not truth. And that
mm,
was really helpful for me, just to not just take what people say from the pulpit as truth, but really analyze it and figure out, not everything that people say or do is right.
mm-hmm.
So,
That is such a powerful opportunity that it's risky, but at the same time, like that is such a good training ground. I guess I would say like it's in a bit of a bubble, but then you still have to weigh the discernment. Oh, that's really interesting. I've never heard of that before.
yeah, yeah, I mean, at first, when they first, told us as a student body that that's what was gonna happen on Tuesday nights, they would bring in a guest speaker and we'd have to discern for ourselves. I remember thinking, "Oh, no, like, don't ever do that. That's awful. That's opening up the door for so many different things." But what it allowed us to do was really go home and dig into the word, because we started hearing our peers talk about something that just wasn't right, or it was a check in their spirit. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, it was really, really beneficial for me.
That's interesting. So, kind of moving a little bit farther into the story, in middle
Alright.
school, typically there are lies that we start to believe either about ourselves or about the people around them. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so middle school was interesting for me. At two parts of it. On the people pleasing and trying to figure out my path part, I remember there was a very short season. I'm not proud of this, but I'm gonna share. Um, but there was a very short season where I remember I was probably 6th grade, and a friend of mine was like, "Let's just, go around and cuss." And we were like good kids, so I remember thinking like, "Yeah, we're gonna be rebels and figure that out." And so we did, and it was stupid. And I remember thinking like, "This is not who I am. Like, this is
Hmm.
silly." And it's drama filled. There was a lot of like friend drama around that time too, because everybody's just trying to figure out who they are. And thankfully, I had one of the best art teachers ever. Her name was Miss Lambert, and she really invested in us as kids, and just she saw a gift in me and she wouldn't let me take the easy way out. So I remember she
Mm.
was like, "Don't you ever draw a sun in the corner of your paper again. That's not how real suns look." And, it was just like she challenged me on everything, but
Mm,
I respected her greatly and still respect her to this day. I think I send her, like, random emails, like, every 5 years or so, just to tell her how grateful I am still from middle
mm,
school, Um, and I I entered a couple of different competitions and whatnot, and I think that's really when my confidence started growing, but I was still so battling insecurity from my parents' divorce and moving and
mm,
not knowing my place or who I was in Christ, really. I believed that God loved me,
mm,
but I didn't know. I felt so far away from what I thought I was supposed to be. So I
mm,
think that's a lot of people's journey in middle school. Is It's a scary time. Your transition to a new school. But I'm grateful for that I can look back and see like how he was guiding me all along the way. The little prompts of his spirit, of that's not quite right, or why don't you do this? Those kinds of things
Mm,
helped me.
that's good. That's really good. So how about high school? Moving a little farther along, were there any relationships or any jobs or any responsibilities that kind of came along that shaped your character?
Yeah, quite a bit. So my church that I grew up in, we had like 100 and something youth, and we did everything together. So we had like a traveling youth choir, and I've been singing for a long time too, outside of art. And so that was really awesome because that was the first time, there's a term like koinonia
Hmm.
community,
Yep.
and that was the first time I experienced that type of community that felt like family. And it was so amazing growing up feeling like you're surrounded by, a group of individuals that love you, that are on the path to learn about Jesus. But in some ways, later in life, it was hard because as an adult, it's a lot harder to create that community.
Mm,
And so I really had to kind of figure out, like, instead of waiting for people um to reach out to me, being the person willing to go first and kind of
mm,
cultivate community. I would say that is definitely something that shaped me, and how I fight for community today.
mhm,
Um, and then I guess, like, with art, high school, any chance I got to go hang out in the art room, skip a class and go hang out in the art room, I would. And so I remember one day I wasn't feeling good and I, like, walked into my, to a different art class, not one of my own, and I just asked him to be, like, the person that they would draw, like the, example, and I fell asleep, and 3 classes later, I wake up, and there's, like, all these pictures of me around the classroom because for 3 different, classes, they were drawing me, on this, like, chair or whatever, so that was funny, but it just goes to show, like, I art was always like, it was always a pursuit for me.
mm,
Um, and community too. So I would say those 2.
hmm. This is going completely off what I typically would do, but I'm curious. What do you think God's perspective is of art?
Mm, I think he's the master creator for sure. He's the
Mm,
master artist, and we can see that all through creation, from the first stroke of light, the first sunset, the first day.
mm,
And so anytime I get stuck creating, I just take a step back and I refer to the master artist because he is the one with infinite ideas, right?
mhm,
And he always comes through, always comes through. And I think that's why I started doing now, whether you believe in this term or not, I use it very sparingly because I'm also cautious of how I use it, but
mm,
prophetic art, right? Like
mhm,
really seeking God on a specific idea in hopes that it will transform the person who views it.
mm,
Um, and I have exercised that with the Lord, throughout my career,
mm,
and I've seen the fruit of that. That He really does give us the answers that we're seeking if we take the time to ask Him and then listen.
mm, mm,
And, yeah, I just think he loves creating and he
mm,
loves art. And there's art that does not bring glory to his name, and there's art that is very dark. And living in New Orleans for the past 10 years, actually now in Tulsa, but living in New Orleans for 10 years, I saw a lot of art that was not, I mean, it would just give you this heavy,
mm,
icky feeling, but I knew that was not the kind of artist that I wanted to be. And I just sought the Lord and he showed me that art is a conduit for hope. And
mm,
how do we share the gospel through something other than preaching, like
mhm,
um it's our ministry is life, is how we live. And so whatever you're doing, God can use that
mm.
as a form of ministry to get his word to others.
Mm.
So
Why do you think there's a lot of parents and a lot of adults that like look down on students when they are trying to develop artistic capabilities, and why do you think that is? Why not foster that and cultivate it?
yeah, that's something that is really hard for me. I get really passionate because I was
Mm-hmm.
the 7-year-old kid who needed art, you know? Um, and to see art programs being yanked out of schools because of funding, it aggravates me to my core. Because
Good.
yeah, because it is so I mean, the moment we stop being curious and playing is the moment that we usher joy out of the room. It's like
Mm,
we need that as a kid. We need to build our imagination and we need to play. And somewhere along the lines, it became, well, you only are allowed to play and be curious and use your imagination when you're a kid. And when you're an
mm,
adult, you have real life problems and family and all these things. And so you have to only use your analytical brain, get things done. And um, so I make sure, my rhythms each day incorporate some sort of imagination or play or creativity, um, something that brings me closer to my relationship with the Lord in a creative way.
mm,
And I think that that is just a really great way um, to draw near to the Lord, if that makes sense.
hmm. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, that's abiding right there. It's playing with
Yeah.
him.
Right.
It's that childlike faith. That's what I was just picturing. I'm just like
Yeah.
just Jesus sitting down and playing Legos with you, or whatever it might be. There's so
Yeah.
many different ways to experience His presence, especially when it comes to creating. I can't use the word magical because that takes away His glory, but it's like
Right.
there's something so
Yes.
fantastic about it, and I mean, it's indescribable. Really,
Yeah.
that is what it comes down to. Man, that's encouraging. All right, I've got more questions on that, but we'll keep moving forward, and I'm
Yeah.
sure it'll come up more. What did life look like out of high school? You mentioned college a little bit. What was your focus as you were leaving high school? This is what I'm doing.
Yeah. So, one story in particular comes to mind, and it's probably one of my most shared stories.
Mm,
Love it so much because it was such a pivotal time in my life. But when I graduated from high school, I went 1 year at a large university. I was in a small town in Arkansas, so for me, I was like, "No, I'm ready to go to the big city," and experience life, and there's freedom. And so anyway, I went 1 year and I took the art program, and I remember like walking into the classroom, and it probably wasn't this, but in my imagination, this is what it felt like, right? Is I walk in and everybody's in black and there's
mm,
no joy, and the art program was very dark, and we had to do a lot of like new drawings and stuff like that, and it was not what I knew the Lord wanted me to do, but I
mm,
still struggled with, well, I don't have a plan B. So, like, what am I supposed to do? I have to stick it out because I made a commitment. And I remember one day, probably one of the last days on campus after my freshman year before I went home for the summer, I walked into this church and it was a pretty large church. So it's not one of those churches that you get to know the pastor or anything like that
mm,
very easily. And
mhm,
I had only been going for a short time too. So I walk in and I go sit at a cafe with my friend, and the pastor walks by, and then he stops and he turns around and he looks at me and he says, "Excuse me, do you sing?" And I was like so shocked, right? Like, that's such a specific question. And yes, I do. But how does he know this? My brain is just processing. And my friend answered for me and she said, "Yes, she does." And he looked at me with all like sincerity and he said, "You should really pursue that." And that was it. And that's all he said. And
mm,
then he walked away. Well, that summer, I went home and I had reconnected with a friend, and she told me that she was going to go to Christ for the Nations Institute in Dallas, Texas. It was like a 2-year Bible college, or 2 to 3 year Bible college, depending on what track you take.
mm,
And she was going to pursue music. and she really wanted me to consider, going with her. Um, so I remember driving myself to my childhood church and sitting in the parking lot. It was probably around sunset, to the evening time. And I just started crying because
Mm,
I felt like I could potentially mess up my life if I made
mm,
the wrong decision. That's how heavy this decision felt. Um, CF&I was not an accredited college, and so I knew there was going to be debt. I knew there was going to be all kinds of stuff.
mm,
It wasn't in the best part of town at that time either, and so,
hmm,
I'm like considering all of these things, and a song came on by Hillsong and it was, "All I need is you, God, is you. All I need is you." And I just remember breaking at that point, and I thought, "You know what? If it all goes, and it doesn't work out, then at least I made a decision to follow Jesus." And
mm.
so right there, I just decided that he was all that I needed, and I just took that intentional step. I signed up for, that college, never visited or anything before. It was like 2 weeks until the deadline, And I remember, like, after that, so my friends at the big university that I had went to, they were so angry with me. They were like, "How could you do this?" I was signed up to be, like, a dorm mentor the next year, different
Mm,
things, and I just left it all. And I
mm,
went to this school that I'd never been to, and I started taking, the music track, and then they only had 1 art class, and this is my favorite story probably ever. Um, they only had 1 art class in the basement of a building with no windows, taught by a teacher who didn't speak English. So if you can imagine,
hmm,
I'm coming in there and he's like, every 10 words we understand. But he taught me how to use roofing tar as a textural element in painting and
hmm.
fell in love with 3D texture on artwork. And so that's why that one class is why I use texture, some sort of textural element in every painting to this day.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think, how funny is it that the Lord took me from the art program of a large university to a basement in an unseen place, where I
Hmm.
thought, I don't know if this is going to add value to my art career or not. And that is the one pivotal moment that kind of shifted and changed my art career.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. So then what happened after that? So after that class was done, it
Yeah.
sounds like you got a degree in something, or maybe you didn't
Yes.
finish. I don't know. But
Yeah, so from that, I got a bachelor's in music and biblical studies. And then I transferred. They had a few colleges that you could transfer credits to, and Dallas Baptist University was one of those.
hmm
And so I met my husband actually at Christ for the Nations, and then we got married, and I finished the other 2 years at Dallas Baptist and got my bachelor's in art. So I had a couple of different little degrees and DBU is awesome. They had such a great art program. It was, faith-based and I didn't have to
hmm
worry about what the subject was that I was going to be painting. It was really helpful for me. So,
hmm
yeah, and then we stayed there in Dallas for probably 5 years and then moved to New Orleans. And we lived there for the past 10 years until recently and just moved
hmm
to Tulsa. So, yeah.
That's incredible. So let's kind of pick apart the New Orleans timeline. What
Yeah,
happened in those 10 years? 10 years is a lot of time.
it
So
is.
what did God do with you in
It
those
is.
10 years?
So, interestingly enough, we moved to New Orleans to start a church plant. And we were there. We lived 7 people deep in a shotgun house in Treme, which was not the greatest of neighborhoods, but, you do what you got to do. And we were in our early 20s and we just had such zeal for the Lord. We thought that He would just like pave the way.
Mm,
And what we learned the hard way was New Orleans was it was a hard community to insert any church into. They're predominantly Catholic there, and there are
mm,
only a handful of churches. Um, but I really learned that it was about building community over establishing a ministry. If that makes
mhm,
sense.
mhm,
And so that church plant group we ended up not moving forward with the church, about 8 months later, and it was devastating to me. I mean, at that point, I'm like, "I chose you, God, like, I followed you. How could you let this happen?" And
Mm,
my husband wanted to move back to Dallas, and I said, "No, we've made a decision to be here. God wants us here for some reason, and I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna
mm,
stick it out." It was probably like when people say they went through like multiple breakdowns at one time, like I went through a faith crisis, marital
mhm,
crisis, like friend crisis, ministry crisis. It was all of them at one time.
mm,
And it was probably one of the hardest seasons of my life to date. Um, so how I started, like, doing art full time from that is, um, about 7 years after that, my husband and I were still, like, in the process of what we thought was, like, rebuilding, right?
mm,
Um, and it's a long story, but basically we were able to plant a seed to a church financially that was in the exact area that the Lord told us was there was going to be a church planted.
mm,
And it came suddenly and we weren't planning for that amount of money, but we were able to pour it into this church and save that church from going under. And they're
mm,
still there today. So that was such a full circle roundabout moment where we were like, "Oh, okay, Lord, like you didn't leave us. In fact, you did what you said you were gonna do. It just
mm,
looked way different than what we thought." But it was during that time where I was struggling. I was like, "Lord, if I'm gonna paint, I don't wanna paint anything that's, um, unless you tell me to. So you're gonna have to speak to me. I'm not picking up a paintbrush until you speak to me and tell me what to paint. That
mm.
will encourage your people." And so for 3 days I prayed and I was like, "I'm not doing it. I'm not gonna be an artist unless he speaks to me." And I came across this term, kintsugi, which have you ever heard of kintsugi?
I don't think so.
So it is a Japanese term and it's used a lot in like ceramics making to where they'll take a piece of broken pottery and they'll mend it together with gold and they'll
Yes,
accentuate, yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
it's kind of blown up the past couple of months, but this was years and years and years ago. And
Mm,
he showed me, it was like they accentuate the brokenness because they say it has a story and that story is what um, stands out and makes it beautiful.
mm,
And I came across that and I thought, I wonder how that would translate on canvas. Like if that would be a really
mm,
cool, painting and call it the Mended series. And it's all about how God overlays our brokenness with his grace. And so instead of these deep, dark cracks, you would have these gold cracks running through the painting. Um, and so I wrote a lot during that time on it. And a pastor friend of mine gave me a book from a Japanese artist just randomly. And it was like one of those moments you're like, okay, God is listening. And this feels like confirmation. So I'm going to go ahead and paint it. And I painted the first one for me. Honestly, I was so broken feeling that I felt like maybe I need this painting to remember that God's grace like runs with our brokenness
mm,
um and is very present even though I don't feel like he cares right now. And so I painted the first one and it took off and people started, "I want one," they started ordering and I write a summary with every, painting that
mm,
I create because I love to give people it's like a stone of remembrance, right? Like, this is why
mhm,
this painting is here, and it's to encourage you, and anytime you need encouragement, I want them to be able to refer back to the meaning. And so, that was the Mended series, and I painted that one series for probably 6 or 7 years ongoing.
praise God.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And then the Lord has just given me a series, it seems like just about every year. So,
Mhm,
there was the Mended series, and then it was all about new horizons. And so I would paint these horizons where the sun glows. It's like gold leaf, but it, can shine in the light. And it's all about embracing something new. And then
mm,
I had the Raising Arrow series, which is all about family legacy. I'm a big advocate for family legacy and building
mm,
something beautiful and honoring your kids and your family unit, for the glory of God.
mm,
And that one was based on Psalm 127, where it talks about like arrows in the hands of a warrior are the children
Mm,
of one's youth. And blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them.
mm.
And I was like, it was like midnight one night, and I leaned over to my husband and I was like, I'm gonna paint this verse at some point. I just need you to know. And he's like, okay, babe, yeah, it's midnight. Like I'm gonna go to bed.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, a couple of days later, I was sitting around a kitchen table with a couple of friends, and this one friend, a friend of my friend at the time, she was her neighbor. She came over and she was probably in her mid-40s at the time, um, maybe early to mid-40s, and her and her husband had been praying for a 3rd child. So they had 2 amazing boys that were preteens at the
Mhm,
time. But they were praying for a 3rd child, and it just wasn't happening. But her husband had prayed every night with their 2 kids, for this 3rd child. Well, being, older, she was like, "Well, I guess it's just not gonna happen, so we can just stop, praying." And then she got pregnant.
hmm,
And so she was like, I really want this baby shower that I'm planning to be something that honors my husband's prayers in a unique way." And I just remember sitting back and thinking, like, okay, I have an idea. Like, let's theme the baby shower raising arrows. And so I kind of took the lead on that and got like, the cupcakes with the arrows and everything. And at that baby shower was where we unveiled the first raising arrow painting. And
mm,
that one too, I've probably been painting for 6 years,
mm,
something like that, and people keep ordering them. So, I told the Lord, I will always paint these series as long as they are, you know, sharing hope.
mm.
So, yeah.
Man, that's encouraging. From what you know of the art world, correct me if I'm wrong, how long does a series typically go for?
Oh, yeah, I mean, some artists put it out there for a year. Some artists,
Mhm,
do, this is available only for this month. But I don't know many artists that are doing the same thing over long periods of time like that.
mhm.
But I just refuse to take them off the table because I love them so much. And so they've meant so much to me, in my
Mm,
journey. And so I have put all of this, it's a part of my journey. I've written a lot. I hope to publish a book around it soon. And so I've got like 80,000 words, and it's hard to condense it all down, but I'm
mm.
trying. And so that's next. But I would love to just put my art as the illustrations of these chapters
Mm,
in my book. I think that'd be really cool. So that's my next project. Yeah.
that sounds incredible. Is that well, I guess you just said next project, so I guess that answers my question completely. So I don't even need to ask that now.
Yeah.
Um,
It's ongoing.
it's ongoing. Yes, that is it. That is a fact. I'm also working on a book right now, and
Mm,
that's a long process in itself.
you get
So
it.
I
Yes.
understand. I do. I do. I do. Um, okay. So then where are you now in your story? Like you kind of gave us all the way back to the beginning up to what you were doing in New Orleans. Where are you now? What are you doing now, and why are you passionate about it?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I it's so funny. So 2 years ago, the Lord gave me like a very vivid vision of what my art would look like moving forward.
Mm,
And I think I was scared of it at the time because it was so different. Um, and not really, I mean, it was still bringing people hope. It was just a different style of painting that I think the Lord wants me to, invest time in,
mm,
but it would require me to humbly come before Him and realize that I don't know how to do that, right?
mm,
And that was such a challenge for me because it's like, "Well, Lord, I don't know where to start." And it seemed like everything that I did, um, for months to try to learn this one technique or this one idea wasn't panning out. And so I kind of gave up on it, to be honest with you.
mm,
I didn't give up on it it was always in me and always like ruminating, day to day.
mm,
But I was afraid of failure.
Mm.
And so for the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of really good things, but it wasn't the thing that the Lord told me to do, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Mhm.
So I've had to reset the past couple of probably 6 months and really assess, okay, why am I getting frustrated with XYZ? And
Mm.
why does this not feel fulfilling all of a sudden? And in reflection, I had to really get honest with the Lord and say, "Oh, I've been doing really good things, but now it's time to focus on what you've asked me to do." And
Mm.
I'm in a new season of creating from an authentic heart, cultivating community and really investing time in the community around my art. I have the most amazing um collectors and friends who, for some reason, keep coming by and buying art, and I'm like, "This is amazing." Um, because they love me too, and
Mm.
I love them, and there's, like, this genuine respect, that we genuinely care about one another, and I think when you cultivate that community, then whatever you do feels fulfilling, um but yeah, I'm spending more intentional time with the Lord in creating. And I
Mm.
think you can see that I did a painting. People can go view this painting on my Instagram at britt albin art. But it's a custom painting I did on Esther 414. Perhaps
Mm.
we were created for such a time as this. And I didn't rush that painting. It took me a couple of months to really understand what it would look like. But it's probably one of my most favorite pieces that I've ever done because the Lord was so real in the creation of this piece um, that that's what I wanna create moving forward.
Mm.
So, if that gives you any insight to where I'm at now, it's creating from an authentic heart, it's pursuing
Mm.
the Lord and making sure my feet are positioned towards Him, and then He has brought the sales, the word of mouth, everything that I have needed.
Mm.
He's faithful and He's true to His word.
Mm. How long do you think you'll be doing it?
I hope the rest of my life.
Okay, good. That was the answer I was hoping for, but I was like, "Oh, maybe she knows something I don't know. I don't
Yeah. No, I
know."
hope to create from this place the rest of my life. I think it's
Mm.
the most fulfilled I've ever felt.
Mm. That's encouraging. Well, kind of taking a step back, looking at the story as a whole, a lot of Christians, they talk about having an aha moment or a light bulb moment when it comes to salvation. Did that happen to you or did it look differently?
Um, you know, I'm a big I guess I view faith as like you walk it out, right?
Mm.
It's constantly evolving. You're constantly learning who God is, constantly learning who you are in Christ. And so though I got saved when I was like, 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there, baptized around then too. I've always had a love for the Lord,
Mm.
but my understanding of who He is has been a lifelong pursuit. And I would want that for others, because it's so back to the creating, it's or creativity. It's so creative and how
Mm.
He speaks to each one of us is so individualized and different that you're missing out on life
Mm.
when you aren't actively pursuing a relationship with Him. And so I've learned that the hard way through life, but I've also had the joy of looking back and seeing, I call them traces of grace, but traces
Mm.
of grace throughout my story. Um, and I'm grateful.
Mm. That is awesome. That is awesome. So would you say that the gospel has saturated your whole creative process then?
Not always, but more so, as the older I get, the more I realize that is my center. That's when I'm
Mm.
happiest. That's when I create amazing things that I step back and think, I created that. It's like you surprise yourself because you're not
Mhm.
focused on your inadequacies or people pleasing. You're creating from that authentic space of, Lord, how can I best encourage this person who's ordered a painting
Mm.
and it takes you outside of yourself, and I think that's what Jesus wants us to do in all things is look
Mm,
for those in need, bring the brokenhearted to him. And yeah, that's so I try to regain focus when I need to and make sure my feet are positioned toward him always.
mm. I like that. Because if your feet were looking like that, you're not gonna move very far, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah, sure. It'd be an awkward walk.
It would be. I have seen people actually walk like that now I'm thinking about it, so I know it is possible, but,
Mhm.
not comfortable, that's for
Mhm.
sure. One of my favorite characters in most stories, books, TV shows, whatever it might be, is the mentor figure. You talked about how there was specific teachers that you had that had great impacts on you. Do you see yourself as a mentor to other people at all?
I do now. I think I struggled with that for a long time.
Mm,
Wanting mentors, but not viewing myself as someone who could add value to others in that way. Um, but I think that's when the seasons, like if you're struggling with seeing yourself as someone who can impart wisdom or something to someone, that's a good indication that you really need to hide away with the Lord and
mm,
have him saturate you in his love so that he can begin to show you the areas in which you can make an impact. And we're called to, where our
mm,
life is ministry, like we said earlier. And um, I used to speak this over myself, and now it aggravates me when I think of this because I used to say I have the Moses complex. Like, I don't want to speak in public. I
mm,
don't want to, like, Lord, use somebody else. Like, they don't need to hear from me. I'll
mm,
just be behind the scenes, and paint something for him. But he really started working on my heart, and he was like, "No, I've given you this story, and you're doing a disservice to people by not sharing it." And
mhm,
that was when I really started, like, taking note of, okay, well, if life is ministry, then how does the Lord want me? And I just started sharing real hard things that I was going through with people. And the
mm,
cool thing is then they started opening up. And it was like now we have this beautiful communication between a group of people where we're not trying to compete with one another because that's the thief of joy, right?
mhm,
We're surrounding ourselves with a group that is genuinely for one another, and it's a safe place to grow.
mm.
So,
It's encouraging. It's really encouraging. I've got a lighthearted question,
yeah.
not to make a hard turn. Are you a more book or movie person?
Oh, I think it depends on the season, but I
Mm,
definitely love a good movie. My husband and I, that's how we love like movie nights and stuff like that. So love movies, but I also really love, like, I have my audiobooks, I have my
mm,
podcasts that I love to listen to, like, just throughout the day. I love to learn and also research. And so that's where if there's a topic like this year, I don't always pick a word for the year. But this year, I felt like I really needed one, to just kind of reset. So my word for the year is authenticity. So right
mm,
now, I'm reading books and listening to podcasts, anything to do with the authentic voice of the Lord, the authentic word of God, and authentic character.
mm.
So I love a good theme.
Okay. Well, good. Well, good. Well, follow-up question. You mentioned a little bit earlier about probably writing a book sometime soon. If you had a story written about your life, what would you want it to be called?
Oh, so I have a title for the
You
book.
do.
Do,
What
but
is
I
it?
I know, I can't I don't know if I should share it just yet, but
Okay.
I will say it's the journey. For the longest time, I thought I was on a journey of becoming, right? Like,
Mm,
journey of becoming an artist, journey to becoming a wife, journey to becoming, um, successful.
mhm,
And what the Lord so lovingly showed me is there's a difference in becoming and transformation,
mm,
because becoming is an outward appearance and transformation is an inward, um, demolition?
mhm. Yeah, that was the picture
So
I had too. I was like, yeah, it's demolition,
yeah, it's
100%.
demolition for sure. And
Mm,
so once I made that distinction, I realized how much of my past has been to try to become instead
mm,
of seeking transformation. And the seeking transformation only happens when you're willing to lay everything down and
Mm,
let the Lord reveal what's important and build from there. And so that would be the story throughout my life is
mm,
positioning my feet towards Jesus. I'll say it 1,000 times,
mm,
and choosing him and then letting him build whatever he wants to build in you by also keeping the heart posture that his way is better
mm,
than our own.
mm. I love that. I love that. Man, I hope God lets me sit with that for the rest of today because I just want to sit there and think about that. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's really good. What would you say to somebody who is scared or intimidated in sharing their story? How would you encourage them?
Hmm. Well, as someone who didn't always think it was easy to share their story, whether it be fear of judgment or fear that they would get it wrong or be seen a certain way, whatever it may be,
Mm,
I would say the the best thing you can do is write it all down. Just get it on paper. Um, or voice text it or whatever, your way is, like,
mm,
just get it down because there's something about writing your story down that when you put eyes on it, um, the Lord starts to reveal, like, how he's been with you or themes throughout your story that, like, really catch you by surprise, and it really helps to build confidence in sharing.
mm,
I probably read my story, portions of my story, like, 100 times. And then every single time I'm invited to do a podcast or share at a women's event or do something like that, um, I'm practicing.
mm,
And so it's playful, right? Because you're like, oh, I wonder if this is going to hit home for this person or, you know, um, but just practicing, but never let that stop you from sharing because
mm,
I think we all could say whenever somebody tells us a part of their story, we feel connected to them, even if it's just by their vulnerability to share.
mm,
And we love stories by human nature, right? Like we love a good story. And so, um, yeah, share the hard parts, share the things because a lot of people are probably just waiting on the person next to them to start sharing. And I would just say be brave and be the first one.
mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Have some grit. Go for
Yeah,
it.
have some grit. It's the kind thing to do. So it's kind of like opening the door for somebody else. It's like, well, I'm just going to open the door for myself. I'll walk through, but then I'll bring you in with me.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's
Because it
so good.
helps people, like
Hmm.
it helps to know that other people go through things and what they're learning um and so yeah, it's a disservice when we don't share because
Mm,
we're not allowing that connection to happen. So,
mm. I agree. I agree. Well, I technically only have one last question then for you. Is there anything else that you sense that God wants you to share on behalf of anybody who'd be listening to this episode?
hmm, let's see. I would just say like just to kind of recap on some things. Don't be afraid to share your story. You'll be amazed at what God can do. Um
Mm,
Don't stop seeking community even when you feel like you have nothing left to give, because isolation hurts hard. I mean, it hurts. So I would say seek community. And then ultimately just position your feet towards Jesus and know that he is faithful to walk with you wherever the future may hold. Um, yeah, those
mm.
are probably the key things.
I love it. I love it. Well, ever since the first episode of this podcast, I have a very silly way of ending the podcast episodes, and that is with a high five with my guest.
Awesome.
So I would like to ask you for a number between 1 and 10, and then we'll count down from that. High five the camera, make it look like we're high fiving each other, and then the podcast episode will be done. So I want you
Okay.
to pick a number.
All right, let's do 6.
6. All right. So 6,
It's
5,
5,
4,
4, 3,
3,
2,
2, 1.
1.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's Infinite Story. If it resonated with you, Send it to someone you think would be blessed by it. If you would like to share your story, please reach out to us at infiniteideas.studio. You never know how far the impact of your story can reach. Take care now.